Bryce, what are you doing?
Trying to, game.
What?
This game is really hard.
Pac-Man?
Yeah.
Dude, you're supposed to be playing the game for next week's episode of Arcade Bookshop.
I mean, I will. I'm really close to beating this.
Right. And what about the book?
Huh?
We're supposed to finish a book for the podcast too?
Oh yeah, I finished that last week. Yes!
Oh, did you finally beat it?
Uh-huh. The first level.
Oh boy.
Listen up now, when we evolve, get ready for Arcade Bookshop. Break your ball, we play a game, check it out. Don't be lame, listen up now, when we evolve, get ready for Arcade Bookshop.
You can listen to new episodes of Arcade Bookshop every other Monday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your pods. You'll always find us with a controller in one hand and a book in the other.
When we evolve, get ready for Arcade Bookshop. Break your ball.
You are listening to the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me today, Spencer, the Boston Bean Baker Church. That's not very original.
No.
I didn't say you're a Boston baked bean, though. You're baking the beans.
Yeah.
You ever have Boston baked beans or not?
No.
They're okay.
No,
They're
never.
like sugary lumps of something or other. Today, again, for the third time in a row, we have another special guest. Author of NSFW, Not Suited for Work, Mr. David Scott. Hey, thank you for joining us.
Howdy, howdy. Hey, pleasure to be here. And there goes my dog. And just to let you know, that is my dog letting me know.
As soon
my
as we
wife is
start
around.
recording.
She hasn't spoke all day, and now she's doing it. We'll let them do their thing.
At least one episode, my dog runs under the table and causes ruckus, and he's a Siberian Husky, so he's not like small.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, no, she's 30 pounds of all Frenchie. She likes to let people know that.
Sorry.
That's okay. He's ready.
Let's go.
They're going to the bookstore
Ooh, nice.
Fun.
because that's what we need more in our house is
Yeah.
books.
I get a stern talking to from my wife when I buy more books and I don't read them. I just put them on. I don't even have shelf room anymore.
I just got this shelf behind me and one for the office. Here's the trick: is you marry a writer, and then you're okay to buy as many books. But now the thing is, my kid's hugely into manga. So he's like, "Can we go to the bookstore?" And I'm like, I can't say no because I know he hasn't finished this collection. I have to finish a collection once I start. So
Well, that's when you get into like competition book hoarding.
Yeah.
It's like one person's books start encroaching on the others, and then you just have a mess.
my wife usually steals my books, but every book purge I've ever done, I always down the road end up regretting because there's some topic or subject I'm like, oh, that might have been what book was. Oh, I gave that book away or I sold it. So
I have yet to do an actual book purge. Like I've gotten rid of a few, one here, one there, but I've never done a full. You know what? They're all going. All these, the whole shelf. I'm just dumping them. I'm giving them away. I can't.
No.
I'll put them in a dirty box in my closet before
Right.
I'm never gonna read these crusty ass 70s pulp fiction books, but
they're mine.
they're mine. Damn it! Nobody will get their hands on my yellowed pages.
Till I'm
I've
dead.
got boxes of books and rat turds out in the garage. I'm sure that I just I can't. One day I might come back and read this book, or I dog-eared it for a reason.
The day you do sell that copy for 75 cents of just some random obscure fantasy novel, all of a sudden you find out it's worth $8 million. And you're like, God damn
Gonna
it.
get made into a movie or something.
Yeah, it gets real popular
Yeah.
all of a
There's
sudden.
only 5 copies left.
I didn't have that happen, but I went to Half Price Books and I was moving and I got rid of a ton of them. They gave me the receipt and they're like, don't lose this receipt because this is your credit, your store credit. 24 hours later, I couldn't find the receipt. So I was just like, oh, I gave away 6 boxes of books.
And well, you probably only
So-
got like $1, but $1 a box probably.
It was more than that. It was definitely more than that. But I don't know, probably washed it or something. Who knows?
That gave me the most random of ideas. Has nothing to do with what we're discussing, but if I had a book just come out, I think a part of me would want to smuggle it into a Barnes & Noble or something and just put it on the shelf. Like if they weren't selling the book,
Yeah.
it goes there and just see what happens.
Somebody did that. Somebody did that on the Whiskey Tit label, or who was, I can't remember who I was talking to, that went into a store and put a couple of books on the shelf and actually did like a fake staff pick. And I guess it sold and they just assumed that it wasn't in the system. So they ordered more. And she goes, yeah, now they carry my book. And I just thought, well, that's a lot of work to move a couple of copies, but good to know. Good to know.
I mean, but it did work.
Yeah.
That is the main thing to take away. Slightly break the law. I don't even know if that's a law. I don't think it's a law to just give a store more goods to sell than they carry.
I wonder what that would fall under.
I don't know. That'd be a very
not stealing. They're actually getting all of the money.
Unlawful giving.
You know,
unlawful giving. Yeah, it's like, hey, this mega corporation, we actually gave them free product and they sold it they didn't have to pay for it, no wholesale price or anything. Yeah, I don't know, but I might try that one day.
I might check it out. I've got one at Barnes & Noble sitting there that I'm occasionally tempted to go in there and move it from the shelf onto like the stack of like buy two, get one half off, signed edition.
That's another thing I would want to do is just go, like if Barnes & Noble did just carry my book, I'd just go and like sign a bunch of copies or just, do something stupid. Just like, yeah, that goes on the bestsellers list this week, the bestsellers rack.
If you do that and tell them, they'll give you little signed edition stickers to put on your book.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
One day. So
That's
anyway, you, sir, as of, was that January you came out with this book? With Whiskey Tit?
I think February. Yeah, I think February.
First of the year. I don't know why I think January. Yeah. Anyway.
Because that first month is just dread.
Dread.
And you just forget about it.
Just us talking about all the resolutions we're going to fail at making. So we're going to get published in this, and this year. And no, we didn't even submit. So before we get into your book, I was reading a little bit about you, and you have a very interesting journey to me because you were a playwright and screenwriter before you tried your hand at novels.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I tried my hand at novels before I moved into playwriting.
Oh, and it just didn't work out, or just
no, I was young. I had I think I'd written 2 books. The first one wasn't very good. My second one actually landed at a big agency. I landed at Ray Bradbury's agency. Not his agent, mind you. I had the junior agent. And I was 23, like just out of college, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to write, legal thrillers for the rest of my life, and thank God it didn't end up working out. But it was a whole butterfly flapped its wings in Japan kind of thing. And then the second book, we were shopping around. And I started, the time between phone calls with my agent started taking a little longer and longer. And you're like, okay, something's going on, start the slow ghosting. And then I actually I had done a little bit of theater in high school, and I met this guy who's a theater student, and we started talking about plays and things like that. And he was like, hey, you ever thought about writing a play? And let me tell you, Caleb, 90 pages versus 400 pages sounded like a vacation. All dialogue.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? A little bit of, So I pivoted to theater, and little did I know that would be the next 16 years of my life would be writing plays.
I would imagine playwriting. I mean, obviously there's going to be not a hindrance, but some issues if you go into novel writing with a background in playwriting, because the way you pace would be so much different, the way you lay out scenes, and obviously the descriptions are going to be lacking in playwriting versus, prose. But I would imagine the dialogue that you learn to write in playwriting would really help. Have you had that experience where your dialogue is just really the easiest thing, or just maybe how you have the characters develop because that's what you're so used to?
Well, it was interesting because I did a lot of research, I read, a number of plays. I read Glengarry Glen Ross because I always thought it was a good template. 3 or 4 scenes in the first act and everybody's in the second act, and just looked at some of the plays that, just started reading a shit ton of plays, and mostly for the structure, because I really wasn't sure if they were doing 5 acts, 2 acts, what was going on at the time. It was mostly 2 acts. But let me tell you, having that, you're telling the story through dialogue versus, the internal, doing soliloquies or stuff like that really, it's like Robert Rodriguez says about filmmaking, your limitations sometimes could be your, the thing that really helps you be more creative. And I liked having the constraints of writing a play. And again, like I said, it was, it's 90% dialogue, 95% dialogue. And for me, because I've, done screenplays as well, plays are like jazz. you riff on the main theme and you go off these grace notes and then it comes back around. And math is, or screenplay is like math. Like it has to, this scene has to serve these three functions, has to serve this, and anything that doesn't, further the plot, character, or whatever gets cut because,
you have to be cognizant of the runtime and everything. Yeah.
Well, it's hundreds of, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to shoot a scene that, is just kind of pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But with a play, you've got that, you've got the wiggle room to kind of play with that. And I really like that. And I also found out that writing plays, I discovered a lot of the characters through dialogue. They would surprise me sometimes with what they said. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. That's going to take this in a different direction. So
yeah, the characters probably almost unfold naturally, like they're writing themselves at times, just because of the nature of playwriting. Especially when you get the actors involved and stuff. You're like, actually, the way this character was written doesn't really fit how the character is. Versus, a novel, you don't really get that interpretation. It's just, this is the character I wrote, so this is how they are.
Right. Yeah. But the theater is funny because people will come to the playwright as, like, hey, what does this line mean? What is it? They'll make an attempt to figure it out and make an attempt to make it work. Whereas, working with the studio or, a big head producer, sometimes you'll get, well, this doesn't make sense. Make it clearer. And then you make it clear. And then it's like, well, this is on the nose. And it's like, well, what do you want?
Right.
Do you want something poetic or do you want something perfunctory? But my big jumping from playwriting to screenplay was probably the toughest because I ended up getting a movie made based on one of my plays. And subsequently after that, I had a harder time generating a screenplay because I would go back and look at old plays and see if I could adapt them, but they end up still being a little bit too talky, which is fine for indies back in the day and back in the 90s and early aughts. But that was learning the grammar of cinema or whatever you want to say, the screenplay writing. That was much more difficult task than writing plays for sure.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned just the budget constraints when it comes to screenplays, because that's something that I think a lot of newcomers to writing screenplays would overlook. Like they don't think, oh, this scene would cost this much amount of money and the studio's not going to pay for that. So you just have to cut it, even though it could be one of your favorite scenes if it doesn't move the story forward and it isn't really necessary. Or even if the scene, they say they like the scene and they want it to be in the movie, but for budget reasons, they have to cut it down and it's not going to be the same. Like I can imagine that could be problematic as well. Because you just have more people that are involved in the making of movies and TV shows versus, you have a crew, and everything for plays, but still, and I have no experience in either. So I would revert to you here, but I would think that a play, you have a lot more say than you would in a screenplay.
Oh, absolutely. And and the big reason for that is there's less money on the line. The less money on the line, the more control you have, right? If you're putting up a play for $5,000 and you're going to make your money back on a run, it's, mostly friends and family chipping in, or your box office doing that. But if you've got a $250,000 movie or, a $1 million movie or $30 million, there's a lot more people keeping an eye on what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because you have to remember, like if you're shooting, a scene, you got to secure the location, you got to get a shooting permit, crew's got to work X amount of hours, you got to feed that crew, actors have to work, the cinematographer, all the lights, and, and then getting it and really knowing like, how is this going to serve? Is this going to be worth a day of shooting to serve the film, or is it just something that I thought might be kind of fun, which you have to really be cognizant of that when you're writing something, for sure. On plays, not so much, right? It's all imaginary.
I imagine with a movie, you really have to put your ego aside, because for me, like if I wrote something I was very passionate about, and then like a studio or a director just came in and butchered it, because we hear all these stories about like movies that why did that movie become like, why was it so bad? It should have been good. It's because the studio and like some producer wanted involvement and everyone had their creative input and it just ruined it. Is that ever a problem? Have you had that ever come up where you wrote something and they just fucked it all up?
I've done one feature, but my wife was a TV writer for a number of years, and she switched over to screenwriting here recently. And you hear stories. You have, story execs weighing in because they have to justify their job. They're not generally creative, so they're throwing out stupid ideas. So you really have to learn how to be diplomatic in a room, but you have to learn to really like, okay, what's the note behind the note? Mm-hmm. What are they saying? They're saying this doesn't work and I should add a dog. That's not really what they're saying is. They're saying is I need to make him more sympathetic at this point in the film or something. So yeah, you can get a lot of studio interference, and it's because everybody's scared. Their jobs are on the line. They have to justify having some kind of input. What's the saying? Like, success has many many mothers and fathers and failures are orphans, right? Like nobody takes credit if your film flops.
Yeah. Another thing in the film industry is those people just love wasting your time too. I have a few friends who have done work with not even major movie studios, just like podcast studios, but like they're owned by like NBC or something. And instead of just having like a Zoom call or something to discuss, they fly them all the way to Los Angeles from Spain or England or wherever they are. And it's like, why? And he's like, I was there for a day. It's like, I mean, they pay for it, but it's like they have this budget and they just don't care about, spend it. Or maybe they have to spend it. I don't know. It's just they love wasting people's time.
Yeah, it's a flex. It's for sure a flex, especially if they think somebody else is interested in that director, then they'll do something really impressive to, get them out, and they're courting. And then once you get to sign on the line, then it's like on the notes, here comes no, we're not going to pay for that. Even though we flew you out first class and put you up, you can't get that drone shot because, whatever, it's going to cost us more money, what have you. So there's a lot of courting and a lot of jilting, and there's a lot of Hollywood divorces, and it happens at almost every level. My wife worked on a TV show recently with a A-list screenwriter who I guess fell in love with this property, and they optioned it, and it was a go. And so he was basically running the show, and it just ended up they got so much interference. They were getting these crazy notes. They were having to redo the scripts, and then my wife got a call about arbitration because they had taken like half of her script and mixed and matched it with another script. And on the day they were shooting the last episode, they notified the showrunner they weren't going to need his services for the next season. And he was like, well, okay, I have a pay or play deal, so you guys are going to have to pay me. And then they realized that they sent it to him while he was on set, and we're like, no, we take that back. We're gonna definitely need you. We don't, sorry about that. And he was like, yeah, no, talk to my lawyer. Like it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of bullshit that goes on. What? And it is really amazing anything ever actually gets done.
I've heard horror stories where some of these people will just shelf a project after it's completed, just because out of spite or just because of a disagreement. And it's like you spent all this money and it's just waste it.
It's a tax write-off. Like
Warner Brothers was doing that. They shelved the Batgirl and a couple other things, and just because because if we never show this, we can write it off.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, here you go. No streaming service except for Netflix is profitable. Okay, Paramount Plus, who paid Tyler Sheridan $200 million for the next, his firstborn Yellowstone project. They're in the hole, I think, $500 million. Disney Plus, their streaming services lose money. All these streaming services lose money, right? Disney's making a real big push now to get shows back into the theater because that's where they make their money, right?
And they started putting out some stuff on DVD again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's another thing you've noticed too, is because there were some shows that I was interested in and they got pulled, but then I could find them on Blu-ray online. So now it's like we're coming back to the short release, and then you can buy it on Blu-ray. But what they're doing is they're writing stuff off, and that really sucks because if you're a writer or a director or what have you, you could have worked solid for the last 3 or 4 years, and you will have zero credit and you will have zero passive income because you won't be getting your residuals or profit sharing or anything like that. But the execs, they still have a job because they're overseeing all these productions. I mean, I talked to a buddy of mine, a couple houses down, is actually one of Nolan's FX guys. And he's like, yeah, they get they'll complete post and then just be like, let's just write that one off. And regarding Batgirl, I didn't see any of it. So I don't know if it was, somebody said it wasn't watchable, but and they didn't want to muck with the brand. But there are shows you've never heard of that have made it, all the way through a full season and just been dumped for a tax write-off.
It's so stupid. And then no one gets to ever see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody gets the Spiderwick Chronicles. I think they did the first season of that and it got dumped. But again, you don't know if it's quality, but mostly it is quality because you have smart people working on these shows and smart creatives. And they're just like, yeah, this would better service as a write-off. Or somebody like Spectrum, Charter Spectrum, was this Charter or Spectrum? One of those cable companies was going to get into doing originals. And then at one point after spending a shit ton of money, they decided, yeah, we're not going to do originals anymore. So then they cut the stuff they were working on or tried to sell it to somebody else. So you just never know how quick a production company or a channel is going to, decide they were going to pivot to something else. And then, if you're caught in that change, bye.
Out of a job. That
Yeah.
sucks. I wonder how often that happens in the book publishing industry, where somebody has their book set to release and then the publisher, for whatever reason, just shelves it. We're not shelve it, I guess. Just fuck that book.
I'll tell you, this is my butterfly flaps and swings in Japan story. I had a crime novel that I got into a publishing company when I was younger. My mentor gave me access to like the Crime Writers International newsletter, which at that time there wasn't anything online. And so I kind of went through and I did some queries and stuff. And then he came back and he's like, I think my publisher might be looking for something like this. So I sent the manuscript off, right? And again, I'm thinking like, I'm set. This is going to be my life. And like 6 weeks later, we hadn't heard back. And he calls me into his office and he's like, hey, the owner of the publishing house died in disappeared in a kayaking expedition, and they didn't find his body. And his wife took over, and she's cutting all the thrillers and keeping just like the mysteries. And like, 2 weeks later, I got my manuscript back with just a form rejection letter. So it happens. I don't think it happens like that, but it did happen to me where, I went from something they wanted to a guy disappeared in a kayaking expedition. And,
it's like something out of a shitty movie.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like it's one of those stupid
How
things.
much wrong? And, there's nothing I could have done, but it was a hard lesson because, when you're younger, I think even more so when you're older, you feel like you get less bites at the apple, when you're younger, as opposed to when you get older. So it was definitely a hard pill to swallow. And I think that might have been one of the reasons I shifted over into theater, because it was, more hands-on, a little bit more community, and was fun, frankly,
You probably have a lot more passionate people in theater because they actually care how the product turns out for more than just money reasons. Because theater, where it does well in some areas, but it's not like it's not like movies, it's not going to bring in millions and billions of dollars, but the people who do it really love it. And, I think that's always the most important thing, is the passion behind something like that. Speaking of theater,
that was good.
When you have a play come out and stuff, have you ever had one just bomb horrifically? Like you watched it and it came out terrible or just not what you expected?
I had, when I was playwriting, I'd always kind of try to like, okay, what's my next play going to look like? Okay, I just did this one with a cast of 6. I'm going to try writing one with just 2 people. How do you do that? And I actually ended up doing a Edgar Allan Poe play that, had, 12 scenes, full costume and everything. And a lot of the dialogue was taken from letters, from correspondence. So I, got it right. And man, I was pumped. I thought this was the milestone in, my career playwriting wise. And we produced it. It went up. The review was like, and it crushed me. It crushed me because the reviewer had given me, an outstanding review beforehand. And I was like, fuck, like that just, it sucked. And there was a couple of showstopper scenes, which were great, but that's not enough to keep the play going. But here's what happened later that year. Cause I was a playwright at Chicago Dramatist. They did a fundraiser and they took one of the big scenes, the showstopper scene, and they did it as part of their evening of, but they did it in a big theater. And people afterwards were like, oh my God, that play was great. Like, when can I see it? Whatever. And I was like, dude, it tanked. It's gone. And I realized it was the size of the space. We did it in a real intimate venue, and you're using, heavy language like Shakespeare. And that gets really melodramatic when you're up close to it, right? Mm-hmm. But when you have heavy, big language like Shakespeare, and they're up on a stage over there, and it kind of fills the area. And we were just like, oh, that's what we should have done. Contemporary clothes in a much, much bigger area, in a much bigger space.
Yeah, that's always the interesting thing when you go into playwriting, is thinking about the venue and the impact it'll have, because, like Shakespearean dialogue and language is supposed to carry. It's supposed to hit the person in the very back. You have like stand-up comedians have the same thing where, a smaller venue, you cannot play the same as a big venue.
Right. Oh, exactly. Exactly. So that was an early lesson, but that was a hard one. So that's answer your question. Yes, I had one bomb, and that one really hurt.
What was the name of that Edgar Allan Poe play?
It was The Fever Called Living, A.A. Poe. Fun side fact, at one point, Scott Rudin was looking for a Poe piece for Michael Jackson to play. At some point, him and Michael Jackson were talking about doing a Edgar Allan Poe play. And I was like, oh my God, my play tanked, but Michael Jackson might end up getting this and playing Poe. And I have no idea how I feel about that.
I would see that play 30 times.
Yeah.
Right?
And if it was terrible, I'd see it another 30.
Right. I'll just make sure I get a piece of the merchandising and just crank out, black market Michael Jackson's Poe. I mean, imagine him just with a little mustache,
Yeah, and you get like an epic Poe line followed by hee hee. Like, oh man. It sucks the things that don't come to be.
Right?
Yeah.
Missed opportunity.
Instead of being like a bright, like silver sparkly glove, it'd be like a gothic black, but still glittery somehow.
Yeah.
Right. You got the Raven covered in sequins sitting up above the door and lights hit it and it sparkles. And yeah, there's so much you could do. In fact, got some ideas now for it.
If only Michael Jackson were still here to be Edgar Allan Poe.
Well, a Michael Jackson impersonator would be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of those. That's a dream I never knew I had till just now. You really opened my eyes here. I'm excited for something like. I think that needs to be made. We'll have to have a vote on DPW. Like, do you want to see this made? We got a guy who will write. We already got the play. We don't even have to worry about him writing it.
Yeah,
we just got to cast it. Started real shittily, like in the park or something. Like Michael Jackson fake Michael Jackson in the park as Edgar Allan Poe.
Hey, AI soon enough, right?
Yeah,
you'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked the last couple.
For that, I would be okay. I would be okay with that. I would be okay for something like that.
You know what? I'm gonna go on an AI generated art app after this, and I'm gonna do Michael Jackson, Edgar Allan Poe, just to see what it comes up with, because I'm interested now. I want to see what that looks like. And what Michael Jackson do you think they're gonna go with? Young Mike, or they're just ghostly white, long haired, scary Mike? He could be a good a big digression. Phantom of the Opera. Michael Jackson, the last iteration of Michael Jackson, I think would have been a good Phantom of the Opera. Anyway, NSFW. You actually had a book before that, The Fountain, in 2011, and I read you had some good reviews on that.
Yeah, I actually self-published it in 2011, and then I pulled it and sat on it for a number of years, and then Miette picked it up and did an official release 2 years ago, 2021. So that's why the dates are all over the place on that.
Well, we were talking, the way you end up coming to our attention, I think it was Miette originally mentioned you, and then Tarina was telling me about NSFW's kind of experimental. Was The Fountain experimental too?
No, The Fountain wasn't experimental in that it has, more of an ensemble cast of characters, and there's some font play in there and some, images and stuff. It's not like, House of Leaves or Maxwell's Demons or anything that crazy, but there's a little bit of fun in there. Like one of the characters imagines what his Oscar moment's going to look like, and I had a buddy of mine draw up storyboards of what the storyboards for the movie that scene would look like. Just kind of fun stuff like that. But it's funny. The Fountain. I don't know if you read up anything on it, but it's the premise of The Fountain, and there's a reason for this, is that if you take a drink of water from the third floor of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, you're able to create one artistic masterpiece, like hands down fame and fortune, but then you may die, right? So that's the central conceit of the play is like, well, do you drink? And it follows like a critic who's a failed playwright who wants to gatekeep the water, but then he wants everybody to drink it so he can be the final arbiter of like what's good or not. And you have this commercially successful artist like Bob Ross who's like, no, it has to come from within, and you have to work things out, and that's where art comes from. And then you have two outsider artists that have done the work, done the time, done shows, but never had that big break. And now they're tempted because they can justify they have a body of work. And again, as you point out, like this originally came out in 2011, and then it got a relaunch a couple of years ago. Water has now become a substitute for AI. Every argument in the book for drinking the water or against it, you could apply to AI.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
because I'm just trying to think of because we've had this discussion in the last few episodes about AI and just how it affects the writing thing. But I'm trying to think what episode it was we did that brainstorming on that story.
Oh yeah.
But it was along the lines of, would you use the AI, like if it got so advanced that it's actually doing all the writing for you? Would you use the AI and take credit for the work if, assuming people didn't know that you used the AI? What is the moral, one, how would you feel with yourself? And two, just what is the morality behind that? Using something, you're not the artist really. You're just using a tool. But then that's the other side of the coin. Are you just using a tool to create the art? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the, one of the artists that becomes the first hit in The Fountain. She's like, well, Johnny Cash took drugs. Michael Jackson took drugs. Jim Morrison was on drugs. This just like this. I just need a helper. And there's a Wikipedia section actually in The Fountain, which talks about the period of The Fountain looking back and how these contracts were now had a water clause, and you had to sign it saying that you did not drink from the fountain water, or you weren't hiding it or had it there. And then it talks about, what happens about the people that just kind of swish it and spit it, they don't die, but does it enhance? Right. And it was interesting kind of going through that and thinking about it. And then all of a sudden that becoming a really prominent conversation.
I mean, if you're a writer and you use editing software, you're using AI to a degree, it's not as sophisticated if it's something just along the lines of spell check and, the click on the, instant thesaurus. These are just tools, but then that's what AI is. But my line is when it's just writing, like you put in a prompt and it just writes the story for you. Even if you change the work that you get from the prompt, it's still, if it was written by something else, I can't in good conscience consider that your original art anymore. Same with online AI paintings people are winning awards with now. It's like, you didn't draw it. You just you just typed in a bunch of words. Right. And sure, you did a really good job with your prompt, but that's not, you didn't do it.
Yes, but I spent a lot of time working on that 80-word prompt to get it just so. I hear people say that. I'm just like, God, how many credits did you have to feed it? Did you have to stop in the middle of the painting and buy more credits for the program? I mean, it's every tool, right? It first comes in and there's a lot of pearl clutching. And then you have, was it Isaac Asimov's magazine had to put a hold on their submissions because they suddenly had an influx of similarly titled and subject matter stories. And they realized they were getting, 100 submissions that were just completely AI.
Which is interesting coming from his, like a magazine from him, considering the, the kind of stuff that he wrote.
Ironic there.
I think we're breaking one of the robotics laws, right?
Well, like we were talking with Miette about the AI. How do you know if you've received it? If because if it's just someone generated a story or a novel, even you could probably tell because it's not going to be that good, I would imagine. But if they changed a lot of it, but just kept the bulk of the story and all they did was add their writer's flourish to it, how would you know? Like, I don't.
Well, that's one of the reasons why the WGA had the strike, because they know that the studios were looking to invest in AI prompt engineers or jockeys or whatever, and they would generate outlines and treatments through AI and then hire a writer for 2 weeks. You're not getting your guaranteed weeks. So that was part of, one of the things that they had to, that the strike was about, was how they handle AI and getting AI protections. Because what they can do is I can commission you to write a script. Hey, okay, you wrote a script. It's pretty good, but at the end of the day, here's a little bit of money and we're not going to make it. But I'm going to feed your script into AI and either use it or I'm just going to use it as language, as a machine learning. And because they had to do this clause where they can't feed any scripts in that they don't own into their machine learning.
Have you checked to see if your work showed up in those? Because we have a friend who two of his books already are in it. And I saw, who was it? You read his word, the Ninth Medal or something?
Oh, yeah. Benjamin Percy. I was talking to him on Blue Sky, and he had a post where they used all of his books. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's like, if you, I don't know what you do with that information other than maybe try to sue or just get really mad. It's like, so now someone can cobble together my specific writing style. AI.
I think Miette had Joey Truman, I think, had a book out under his name that he didn't write, and it sold a few copies. So they were trying to figure out, you're trying to get somebody who has enough books out that maybe they won't notice, but it has enough people buying them that there's a little bit of money. I mean, there's easier ways to make money than that. But that was Stephen King, Stephen King and James Patterson and all the the big wigs suing for copyright because they've gone we fed in all of Stephen King's novels. And this is this is how machines are learning, and they're just that's not an appropriate use. But the thing is, people will do it until they get busted. The AI with the actors is not being able to use the digital versions of themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But what happened is, in the last 2 years, if you were an extra on a Warner Brothers, I don't know if it's Warner Brothers or not, let's just pretend it is. Warner Brothers, you would, you guys would come, I would tell you to get in costume, put in your costume and step in this tent, and we're going to full body scan you for continuity. for your costume. But the thing you signed that day was signed away your likeness, right? So Caleb, when you go off and, you know, get your Oscar nomination, I've actually got the rights to your likeness, so I could generate my own movie with you starring in it and not pay you a penny.
And it's gonna be a nasty movie.
Yeah.
And they
do some nasty things.
But for 2 years they were doing that. For 2 years they were doing that. You know, they do it until somebody tells them no, or they get caught, and then it, you know, becomes a big kerfuffle. Yeah,
well, it's so new, the technology, that they haven't created too many laws because they haven't had to come up with it yet. You know, certain things haven't happened yet. They can theorize what can happen, and they can hypothesize maybe somebody would use it in this way, but until it actually happens, there's no warrant for them to make a law, even though they could make a law because they're aware of what could be the possibility of this stuff. But they won't, because ultimately book publisher, studio execs, these people, if they could, they would make their products without any creatives involved that they would have to pay. So a book publisher would publish a book by an AI in a heartbeat if it means they didn't have to have any of those pesky authors doing work and, you know, having their creative input. There's
still a few movie stars that sell tickets.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's the thing. There's still authors who they have a persona that people know, you know, like a Stephen King. You're not going to replace a Stephen King. You can have some AI write exactly like him and write the books he writes, but the author that everyone knows and the name they go for.
Uncle Stevie? Yeah. Who's gonna Uncle Stevie being a robot? Yeah. No, that won't happen. You know, I think my contract for Hard Scrambled, there's a point in there where they we own the rights to this in any form or medium yet to be discovered, known or unknown technology in the known universe. Like there's that kind of language.
Jeez.
Because, you know, they're trying to get ahead of the VHS, you know, Blu-ray, home video thing. So it's, that language can be pretty stupid. Not stupid. I mean, it's smart for them, but, you know, you could argue that AI is part of that too, but it's crazy.
Well, any big contract you sign, say you got a book deal from one of the big five, and you have to, let's say, 5 years, they want 3 books out of you or something, but just all the rights that you can give up without even realizing it if you're a first-time author, like, you know, it's your first book and your first book deal, and you're like, oh, I'm so excited. You know, sure, you can have my international rights, you can have my movie rights. I don't care. I just want to get my paltry whatever amount of advance they give me, and I got a book deal. And then a lot of those people just end up bitching and complaining about, oh, this deal sucks ass, just like the music industry did for so long.
Caleb, I tell you, I am shocked at the amount of writers I've spoken to that didn't have a lawyer go over their contract. I'm shocked. Like, they're so happy to get it. They don't want to be difficult to work with. Maybe they wanted to negotiate a little bit and they got pushed back and they didn't want to be that person. But I know people that have given up, film and TV rights. And that's the only way you're going to make money on a property in the long run is, film or TV rights. And those books are floating around forever. And you never know who's going to dig one out. But they're just like, well, that's a long shot. I'm like, yeah. And if your long shot comes in and you're not getting anything, like what's unless they're actively shopping around trying to sell the film or TV rights for you, which some companies do. They have, book divisions and they can package, and that's fine. But they didn't push back at all. They didn't have, they had like friend's sister looked at it who, maybe was a paralegal or something. And it's just shocking. Like I've paid money to have a lawyer look at every single one of my contracts because God forbid, your lottery ticket come in and you don't know, you've already signed the money away.
A lot of emerging writers are really scared that contract's just going to get pulled away from them, and they're just going to end up with nothing because that's, when you're first coming up, it just seems like everything is so fragile. It's like, oh, it took me so long to get an agent, and it took me so long to get my book in the hands of a publisher, and finally when it gets there, I'm just going to risk them taking it away and just being, no. Yeah. So, but you have to be more hard-nosed than that. Like you said, you just have to, pay to have some, like an actual lawyer go over, because they use that legalese that's just indecipherable for most people.
Right.
And you'll just get fucked in the end. That's basically what will happen, because they don't want to pay you. That's not their
And if
goal.
you're going to get fucked, at least know what you're getting fucked for and what you're getting fucked over for, right? I mean, you got to know what's in there.
At least know where to put the lube,
Yeah.
Contracts are only worth as much money as you're willing to spend to enforce them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to do a segment one day where we get past authors on and they just all complain about some bad deals they got. Because I have talked to a lot by now. Just It's like, why did I sign
Well,
that?
in the movie business, especially on the indie world, they're like, well, yeah, you're doing this one for next to nothing, but you're going to make your money on your next one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, motherfucker, it took me 15 years to get this one.
Yeah.
That second one is not going to be as easy or easier. So it's, but it all depends on what you're consider a write-off, yourself and, opportunities.
That is where AI has the human race on the ropes. It's going to be alive while we die. Yeah. Unless, a solar flare blows up the whole system. A writer only has a finite lifespan. AI, as long as computers are around and the technology and people pushing it is around, it could just go on forever. So it'll outlive us most likely. So that's like a dystopian world that we have to
look forward to.
Yeah, or at
if
least
we make it that far.
Children's children, the robots write all the books now. Yay. Anyway, again, your current book, NSFW.
Happy Monday.
Happy Mondays. And we're like 40-something minutes into this. So how did this book come to be? Because this one's like more experimental, more than the Fountain, right?
Definitely more experimental.
Okay.
In shape and I think in content a little bit. Actually, I might have to. I got the low battery warning. Can we pause for a second?
Sure.
Yeah.
How did Not Safe for Work came about? Pure panic. Miette had bought The Fountain. I was working on a different project at the time and had that thought that, she may actually want to work with me again and publish a second book, which I don't have. So I panicked my way through 30,000 words on another project. And then I started seeing these articles about social media moderators having PTSD from their jobs, making minimum wage, no healthcare benefits. And I think that was the time we probably had, a bunch more school shootings and stuff. So there was a lot of gun violence going on. And I was like, wow, okay, I could do a meet cute over beheading videos and kind of just take this social media and digital agenda thing that we're all being bombarded with and misinformation and stuff and run with that and see what happens. And it clicked and it really worked because during the pandemic, everybody's doom scrolling and you're at home going through, looking at all the, this article, this, and always, hit another viewpoint opposite here and there. Just like, how do you find balance in that? And how do you keep from spiraling down? So essentially this Not Safe for Work NSFW ended up being a love story, like love in the age of trauma. And the two main characters are trying to make it through their first 90 days to get healthcare benefits and a mystery bonus. And that's the top level plot thing. There's, other agendas and, some secret stuff that pops up, plays on a broader canvas. But originally it was kind of like, I wanted to see how two people could have a relationship in the middle of all that garbage.
Well, especially when you consider that in a world where you are basically numb to everything because there's so much bad news, there's so much horrible violence, and just anything you could think of. When you become numb like that, to find an emotional connection with another person, I think that would be really hard, So I would really be interested to see how you unfold that love story there, because it's like you would have characters who would, I mean, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine would have trouble connecting and have to overcome that lack of emotion they would have to do their day job, especially when they're struggling with PTSD. And because I think there was a David Foster Wallace short story. I can't remember the name of it, but I think there was a character in there who had like a job where almost like an NSA type of deal, but all they did was watch the most terrible videos that are on the internet.
Right.
And this is like probably 2000 or something. So I couldn't even imagine how much more now. If you had to be a social media moderator, that'd be terrible.
It kind of reminds me of that episode of South Park whenever Butter gets hired to read all of Cartman's like bad social media so he doesn't have to, and then it's like Demi Lovato and what's the fat karate guy what's this who used to do all the like one of the old like 80 guys not Stallone, but
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
No,
Steven Seagal.
Yes, Seagal. Yeah,
it's an Aikido master, not karate.
Oh, whatever. He doesn't know anything.
Fucking classless mook. Oh God.
But like Butter gets sick after like a couple of days of just going through all that nonsense.
I mean, I do that just on Twitter. The bad news feed I get recommended to me. I don't follow any of this stuff, and I'm just like, I don't even use the app barely because of that. It's just horrible.
Well, the book kind of plays in that, like, it's a lot of factoids are thrown in here and there, and you flip through the book, you can see that it's a quick read because there's a lot of white space, but it's like really, really punchy, with the character stuff and then the stuff they're seeing. And I went out of my way to make sure that it wasn't super graphic. Right? Like, I don't need the nuance of it. I can just say, thing in the microwave, right? And your imagination takes over. I don't need to go, detail by detail, because that is part of the process of them getting numb to it. And as I think we are, and it's like, how do you, like you said, what's an emotional connection look like when every day, or, one of their pod mates, sells Xanax. They do all sorts of, crazy, in the office sex and other stuff. But it's not like titillating sex. It's really just like cathartic. Are we both on the same rock at the same moment? We're going to die. It's like that, post-funeral sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that affirmation that we're still alive and have a little bit of distraction. Not that I go to a lot of funerals for post-funeral sex, but that's just what came out of my head.
Are you a secret funeral crasher?
Yeah. I've crashed one wedding, but I'm not crashing a funeral. I saw somebody post that, like, for $100 you would pay her, she would go stand in a black trench coat and sunglasses and a black umbrella at the edge of your funeral, so people would suspect you had a secret life. I thought that was pretty funny.
I always like that idea. That was always good. Actually, in Japan, they do have people that you pay just to go to your funeral for you and do stuff like that. I would love to do that job. Just stand there looking menacingly, just like,
Right.
Tommy gun or something. Like, what the fuck? What was he into? That guy making sure he's really dead or what? Is he even in the casket or did he fake his own death?
Right. People constantly touching their ear, talking into the wrist. Yeah.
Are we in the Matrix
Give him
now? What
something to talk
happened? Yeah, speaking of trench coat guys, I would imagine in like the scenario for your story, when you have these people who are not defunct of emotions, but they're having trouble connecting. When you get things like school shootings, for instance, become so mundane, which is sadly our real life now.
Yeah, it's getting that way.
What would be at one point, I mean, you just think of Columbine, at one point would have been a world-changing event and, a national tragedy. Now it happens like every week or something. And so we actually can see in real time what it is like to become desensitized to these kind of things. And I am really interested in just how you would go about writing a character because I mean, you don't want to, like, for Gen Z, for instance, you don't want to just categorize it and lump them all into one thing, but the way they talk and the way they act, it's very specific to their time and, the technology that they're bombarded with and the social media. Because I watched a reel or something where some Gen Z kid was like, why do millennials talk so slow? And it's like, because we didn't have, 30-second videos that we had to get a message across, and a certain amount of characters we had to get a message across in. But so when you have like these kind of
spelling words.
Yeah. So I guess it's a roundabout way of asking, how did you go about writing these characters? Like, did you really just have to watch people and just try to imagine what it's like to live that kind of life, or what?
No, I mean, the cheat code on that is the main character at Savage is Gen X, because he, and it feels like a little bit like a man at a time, because like he says, he lived pre-video games, post-video games, pre-9/11, post-9/11, pre-internet, post-internet, right? So we've seen the culture change significantly, before and after was not always, was not always for the better. So I don't think I represent Gen Z or, some older millennials in it had dug it, but it's really from that perspective of somebody that has seen both sides of the coin and has lived both sides of the coin, and seeing where we're going now is like that vanishing point we're going to hit, and it's not going to be pretty. And not a big spoiler in here, but the book, there's a Russian component that rears its head in the book. And when I was writing it a couple of years ago, I thought, how passé. But that's okay, because I grew up in the, Cold War. So, I pulled out Russia as an old chestnut. And
look at us now.
I was
what is old
in
is new again.
negotiations with a Russian publisher for The Fountain when the war broke out. And I was like, you have got to be fucking kidding me. Like, now the Russians are rearing their ugly head. Like, holy shit. And there's an event in the book not unlike what's happened with Israel and Hamas. I'm just like, right? Like, you can only be ahead of the curve so long before you catch up to it. And it's just the line between satire and fiction is so thin now. And now it's like, it's such a blur. Like you got the shit we were joking about, Michael Jackson, AI doing, Edgar Allan Poe. Dude, 18 months from now, I guarantee you, somebody's going to do, him reciting The Raven.
If it's not done already.
Yeah.
If it's not already done, right? It's crazy how the unimaginable or, what seems so bizarre and abstract is like, we're headed there. And that's, and it's scary.
It's hard to write something original now set in the real world because you don't know when your fiction will become reality. Yeah. Like our buddy Nicholas Obregon, his third novel is set during the Tokyo Olympics. And as soon as the novel came out, COVID happened and they pushed the Olympics like a year or two or whatever they did. So he's like, my whole novel's fucked. Thanks. It's like, great. Fucking worldwide epidemic, you fucking piece of shit.
Yeah. I mean, I said, not safe for work because in the near future, there's also a pre-hack and a post-hack, which isn't really explained. Yeah, some of those things that because I was talking to this other guy, like when I'm working on a book like this, which is set in the near future, I read a lot of white papers. I read a lot of dissertations. I read a lot of, Wired, Ars Technica. I'm on Reddit. I'm reading about the stuff that, people have been screaming about 10, 15, 20 years ago are now kind of hitting that tipping point. And you can kind of see the momentum and the next thing that's, around the corner. Because by the time it's on mainstream news, forget about it. It's just it's a PR release and, it's already passed you by, right?
Yeah. Well, I like the way you went about doing the Gen X thing because that creates a more nuanced character versus it's hard to have an objective character if they only live through one side of an event. So if you wrote that story with just like the Gen Z generation, they wouldn't understand, like you said, what it was like before 9/11, what it was like before the internet. They wouldn't have that perspective. So you definitely could tell a more nuanced and more interesting story that way. But I worry, like, what's going to happen in the next 15, 20 years when we don't have so many writers who are able to write from experience from the other, side. Because eventually the new generation is going to catch up where they're the old heads. And then
right.
like we're going to get where they're trying to have writing from their time period. And then the new kids, who the fuck knows what they're going to be into. And it's just,
well, I tell you what, I've got my rig set up here. I've got all this classic sci-fi behind me, 90% of which I haven't read. I just like buying books and putting them on a shelf because it looks pretty. I had read, before that, did not safe for work. I read like 1984, I skimmed Brave New World, etc. that years ago. Clockwork Orange. Like I went to read back all the dystopian classics, right? Just to see like what made them tick, right? Because they were of them own selves. They were anyway, they were singular. And I've totally lost the thread. There's the brain fart number one. What was I talking about? Oh, all right.
An hour into the episode and you forgot. It's not too bad.
Yeah.
Like, that's better than what we usually get.
I was reading J.G. Ballard, who wrote Empire of the Sun, Crash. These books. These were turned into movies, so these ones I was reading his book of short stories, and one of them was published in 1962. And a guy comes home from work, and he's tripping over boxes that are like in the front foyer area that some delivery bot has dropped off. He doesn't know what the fuck is in them. His wife says she wants a third wall TV. And, he's like, we already have two and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God, I just tripped over a fucking Amazon box. And, we just had to put a TV in my kid's room because otherwise I'm going to lose the living room TV to the PlayStation. And this was 1962. So, he didn't nail everything, but man, there was a lot in there that was very recognizable from, 60 years ago. So it'll be interesting. You say like, what is science fiction going to look like in 60 years? Right.
Yeah.
Will somebody, read something like, wow, they really kind of nailed it back then. So I don't know, but it's fun for me to go back and read old sci-fi by smart writers that aren't just doing the pulp stuff to kind of see where they think things are going to go and see how close they are. And man, there are like, you can see the points of divergence where we kept going down this road or like, oh, we didn't quite go that way, but It's kind of frightening and scary, you know.
I'd say I had that same experience a few years ago. I went on a H.G. Wells mini. Like I hit the 4 like big like The Invisible Man,
Time Machine,
the
War of the Worlds,
and then the Doctor of Duro. And like all those were like, I was surprised on how well they were, and like the actual science, because like he actually knew his stuff back then. Like he like studied a lot of science, you know, like studies and stuff like that. And it was interesting to see like that aspect of what science fiction was at like the turn of the century, right? You know, that was a pretty cool thing.
Now, obviously they're outdated, but did you think there was enough meat in there that you're like, holy shit? Like,
the only one I didn't really like was the time machine. It was weirdly written for me, but all the other ones, like I really like those ones. And I was like really surprised about the Island of Dr. Moreau, of just how like weird and visceral some of like the animal people and stuff like that was. Like I wasn't expecting that out of his work. That was like the last thing that I read, and it was like that really caught me off guard. I was like, oh well, that's kind of interesting.
Something that's very, very old. That, you know what, that actually brings up something that tickles my brainstem, because you were talking about how, you know, imagine what sci-fi will be like in the future. Imagine what sci-fi will be like when, assuming mankind's able to get their shit together enough for us to traverse the stars, have AI that actually functions the way it was meant to be, which is to help humans not overtake us and Terminators and stuff. And I was just thinking, like, what would you be able to write about if we're already doing all the cool shit we always imagine? Like, that would be hard. I don't know if there'd be a sci-fi genre anymore.
I think they'd be all time travel. People would be writing about, going back to medieval times, right?
Yeah. But what if time travel becomes a thing? Then what? I don't know.
And then you've got, these, like Stephen Baxter does hard science and, like fourth dimension, scope and scale, where as a narrative, it's amazing, but not necessarily entertaining, right? Because it just gets too bizarre. So yeah, it would be interesting to see what becomes, I guess it'll always come back to human relationships, right?
Well, right now, sci-fi has seemed to have gone down a hard sci-fi road where realism is very important. You think of like Nolan's Interstellar, you think of The Martian. A lot of the works that are getting, I mean, there's still fantastical stuff, but a lot of them are really based in like they want it to be something that could happen or that you could imagine this is real, versus the fantasy of yesteryear where it's like, let's just have fun and see what the fuck we could come up with.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting, especially, because you're talking 40, 50 years from now, like, what role will AI play in that too, in terms of the writing and stuff. Of course, we're the age, when AI first came up, we were all screaming, Skynet. Has nobody seen Terminator? Skynet, what are you doing? Every scientist needs to watch Terminator, because we're running around Skynet t-shirts 20 years ago. Like,
I think they're using that as the blueprint. It's like, no, let's make Skynet. We want.
How do we get to that point now? That seems like they make a lot of money.
Like, the Matrix universe is kind of hard, and using humans as batteries is actually inefficient, but we can enslave everybody with the robots, and, Skynet's not a bad thing. I don't mind a Skynet universe, honestly. It's like, just take me out. I'd rather go quickly if we can. That's my goal. If we ever have some kind of abomination take over the world, I'd rather just be like on the first wave, If
that's like if the bomb ever dropped, I wanted to be on my house.
Yeah, just take me out. I don't want to be like on the fringe, living in the woods, and like the road. I don't want to be eating dirt out of a can and having cannibals come after me. I don't want to deal with that. That's a lot of work.
Well, it's funny seeing the younger generations like, look, we're fucked. If this happens, I'm gonna be one of the first wave people that dies, because I can't build a fire. I don't know how to cook. I don't know. It's like, I'm just not gonna worry about it, because I'll just deal with it then.
I love that attitude.
You got preppers, with bunkers and food and stuff, and I get it. I mean, we're in California, so we're set for 90 days or 3 weeks. If we got to bug out, or if we've got an earthquake where we've got to have
food and, power and stuff like that, we're set. But yeah, like we're not set up for, the dystopian
Hellscape.
zombie apocalypse. Like, shit.
It's like, why would you want to survive that?
Right.
I just love that attitude, though. Just, things got hard. I'm just going to go lay down and die now.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to go die. Game over, man.
Well, I tell you what, when we get close to that, weed will be legal in every state.
I would hope so.
We can't do anything else, but here's your monthly allotment of government weed, right?
I don't know what kind of universe that would be when it's like, things are bad when the government's like, just take the drugs.
Just handing it out.
Please.
This will be fighting to privatize it and everything else.
Well, we've breached the hour mark, though I do like the dystopian talk. We need more guests to come on and just talk about dystopian hellscapes, because that's a lot of fun. Especially when it's like something that might actually happen sooner than later. But where can the fans go and find, and I say fans because they're going to be fans of yours after this, where can they go to read your work, buy your books? Let's throw some social media links in there too.
All right. I'm on IG at david.scott.hey.official, which is a bit much bigger mouthful than saying it out loud.
That's a lot of
David
dots.
Scott Hey official with the dots in there. They used to be called periods, but now they're dots. You see?
Yeah.
Hashtags used to be pound signs. See how language and symbols are transforming? You can buy Not Safe for Work NSFW at whiskeytit.com and just look for my books. If you do a code, you do DSYAY, DSYAY, it'll get you 30% off both my books.
Nice.
Oh,
If
nice.
you're interested in that. That's me. I'm not on Twitter X. What's funny is I almost included the X app in Not Safe for Work because I knew Elon was working on a super app and that he was probably going to end up buying Twitter to do that. And I just like, fuck him. He doesn't need any more publicity. So I cut it. And when they announced, it was like, oh, can you believe this? I was like, dude, this has been the work for years. Years. He wants a Wii app. He wants an American version of Wii app.
Oh,
That's who he's trying to compete with.
wonderful.
But anyway.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Fucking, well, we thank you for coming on. That was fun.
Hey, thanks, Caleb. Spencer, that was a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah, next
Shooting
time
the shit, man. Love it.
next time I'll try not to be so hungover.
It's okay.
I mean, it's the drunk. That's kind of our excuse. It's in the name. So,
Yeah.
But usually we do the drinking on the show, not before the show. Sometimes before the show.
Yeah.
Honestly, it doesn't really matter anymore.
Well, I'm on the whiskey tit label, so I mean,
Yeah.
there you go, right? It's perfect fit.
Yeah, that's what I thought when
Yeah.
Tarina reached out to me. I was like, whiskey tit. I was like, well, I actually submitted to them, so I knew of Whiskey Tit, but I never really thought of the name too much. I thought it was just a cool name. And I was like, wait a minute, that is a good fit.
Yeah.
It's like match made in, well, I wouldn't say heaven. You can follow us at DPW Podcast on social media. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that X. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'm not promoting it. You can just Google it. That's the easiest way. We
Yeah.
come up on everything. Spencer's OnlyFans this week. What are you, the Boston Bean Baker?
Baker, yeah.
That's like kind of wholesome.
Yeah.
Making beans.
Yeah.
I hope that's what you're doing on there. People pay for that, huh?
Yeah.
Pay for a lot of weird things these days.
They do.
They don't
I've
pay
seen
me.
this on
but-
PBS.
All right, folks. Well, we thank you for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Hey, Caleb, you wanted to see me?
Ah, Spencer, my good fellow. I've been expecting you.
Yeah. So, did you want something or
Want? Goodness, no. Require.
require?
Yes. I require your services for the briefest of moments.
Okay.
Surely you can see the predicament I'm in.
Well, actually, no, I can't. I lost my glasses at the pub last night.
A pub, you say? Surely you can't be serious.
As serious as a fought during a rectal exam. And stop calling me Shirley.
Rightio. Anyway, if your spectacles were affixed upon your face, you'd see that I, the host of the most prodigious writing and books podcast in the business, has been immobilized by a rather substantial stack of fallen folios.
What?
My to-read pile finally fell on me while I was taking a nap.
But you're on a podcast table.
I hardly see how that matters.
And you're naked.
I hardly see how that matters.
Dude, your hairy ass is touching my drink coaster.
I hardly see how that matters.
It matters to me.
Can you just unbury me?
No way. Your reckless reading got you into this mess.
Blockhead! Wait! Don't go! There's a copy of War and Peace wedged in my taint. Spencer! Can you at least leave me a bottle of whiskey? Hello? Can't get enough drunken nonsense? Listen to new episodes of the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast every Tuesday wherever you get your pods.